1984, a new show joined a run of Saturday morning cartoon robots that turned into other things and fought each other. It was the Transformers that were created. Since the 80s, the franchise has been chugging along in shows, comics, and movies, and on occasion reaching great peaks like the 2000s before dying a terrible heat death before resurging in the late 2010s, and now in sort of a strange limbo. But what was the show that brought fame to the robots? The show that was essentially 30 minutes of ads for a toy company. Evidently, the 30-minute advertisement worked, as it stuck with enough people to stay as a relevant franchise, unlike some shows like GoBots or Gem, or that Star Wars cartoon featuring Ewoks. Oh god, no, not more of this, not again. But how did this massive franchise become so relevant? How did it start? Well, let's dive into the world of Transformers, Generation 1. Spoilers, obviously.
Work friends.
Work friends? You've been inside me.
So, before everything, let's go with the basics of how the Transformers were created. In 1978, Marvel Comics and Japanese company Toei had themselves a deal, including creating Japanese Spider-Man. And one of the things that Marvel got in exchange was they were approached by a toy manufacturing company and created a comic series based on several different toys produced back then. They took the original toys and made up stories and backgrounds for them and produced a decently successful comic book run, which then gave them the idea to try this with others. So in 1983, Marvel found two toy companies to do just that, Diacon and Microchange, two robot toys that transformed from robots into other things. Marvel at this point was producing G.I. Joe, giving the characters backstories from the character cards from the action figures that you purchased from, and of course, G.I. Joe was joined with a comic book run, then a show.
They think everything's fine, everything's good. They wake up the next day and they're on fire.
G.I. Joe!
So we know that this formula indeed actually works. But currently they have two toy companies. What do they do then? Create two different series? Well, Diacon did have a brief standalone run, but no. Marvel decided to combine both toy series together and create a brand new story and characters. To start off everything with a cartoon, they made a 3-part special to act as the series pilot. Thus, the Transformers was created because, they transform, and the lore of the Autobots versus the Decepticons was created, with them having a civil war on the planet Cybertron that was now dying. And that's where the cartoon begins. So let's begin. First with a very fun opening song. After that, the rest of the show. Here we're shown that not only has the planet been devastated by war, but the Autobots have also lost the war and were now on the run. And then that's how we see our first two Autobots, Wheeljack and Bumblebee, grounding for whatever energy source they can. They're two different characters, meaning that for a Saturday morning cartoon, they have unique gimmicks like Wheeljack being a nerd, and we're introduced into transforming. And as they're heading back to base, they meet up with our first Decepticons, and Starscream has quite the different voice.
Autobots, stop them!
More likely than anything, there's an animation error, or more specifically, a coloring error. This will happen a lot throughout the series. These 80s cartoons were really held up by duct tape and superglue, weren't they? Anyways, after a firefight, the Autobots manage to escape, but a Decepticon Soundwave was spying on them, and now he shows off his cool gimmick, cassette tapes. Yeah, no. Even in spaces, cassette tapes are still just cassette tapes. Like everyone else turns from spacemobiles to cars, but the cassette tapes are universal, I guess. Anyways, his cassette tape has Laserbeak, who scouts for him. Here we're introduced to more toys, Autobots, including Jazz, played by Benjamin Sherman Scatman Crawford, and of course, Optimus Prime. It is interesting to note that back in the Japanese Spider-Man video where I reviewed an episode, I made fun of the fact that the voiceover and really every other character literally named all the characters and described every obvious action. But for this cartoon, names are dropped when needed, like Wheeljack and Bumblebee refer to each other by their first names, but they also mention Optimus Prime. Then we're introduced to this leader, and it's easy to assume that this is Optimus that they were referring to. Obviously, there are still some more cheesy and obvious elements for this being a Saturday cartoon for kids, but it does so in a far more natural way. It wasn't something I ever thought of until comparing these two different shows from one another. So, Soundwave returns back and we see Megatron with the real Starscream being told of the Autobots' attempts to leave the planet, and thus Megatron goes on his evil monologue. Also, Frank Welker talks to himself. This will happen a lot He's like half the Decepticons here. Then Starscream's dichotomy with Megatron is introduced as the second who always complains and whines about how he should be in charge and how Megatron is just big and dumb. And for the most part, he's honestly not wrong throughout the show. I mean, to be fair, the few times Starscream is in charge, it doesn't go much better, but still, always entertaining to listen to. Now back to the Autobots. They board a ship and fly off only to be chased by the Decepticons. And as this chase occurs, an asteroid field is created in front of them for, plot convenience. After dealing with the asteroid, the Decepticons board the Autobot ship, and they have a big fight that causes them to crash land on Earth 4 million years in the past, inside a volcano. Years later, the volcano erupts. Peter awakens and resurrects from his Decepticon Skywalker by accident, and then he resurrects all his friends with his new transformations of. They then escape and leave the Autobots for dead. Except Starscream decides to try and rebury everyone, causing the ship to shake, and Optimus slides his way into the healing beam, which allows the Autobots to then return as well. So Optimus then sends Cliffjumper and Hound to search for the Decepticons, which was pretty easy. Then Cliffjumper wants to fight all of them by himself, and Soundwave's red for some reason. Hound eavesdrops on their convo, and it turns out that the Decepticons created a teleporter and are planning to harvest all the energy sources from Earth and take it back home. Cliffjumper has a big gun, and his attempts to fight everyone goes about as well as expected. But after a few bumps, they do manage to get away and report back to Prime. So the Autobots go after the Decepticons. Lots of toys are being named, and we're due to Decepticons go from power to an oil rig, of course. And now we're shown the human characters, Spike and Sparkplug Witwicky. So the Decepticons do some gas siphoning as the Autobots come in. Well, how do these cars arrive? They're in the middle of the ocean. No worries, for you see, Autobots can fly. Yeah, that's right. Pilot episodes and pilot episodes only, the Autobots have the power of flight. Removing this ability made sense. It gave the good guys a disadvantage and also explains why they would go around driving on land and have Air Force specific Autobots and in need of things such as jetpacks. For a debut fight between two sides for a massive cartoon series, it does just kind of look like a group of idiots having a slap fight, though some of them have guns. So it's pretty tame and sort of jarring when you know what happens in the future. So Megatron ends up destroying the oil rig and escaping, forcing Prime and the Autobots to deal with damage control. Now as everyone tries to escape the oil rig, there's some bad lip flapping.
Thanks, Braun. Let's take off!
As more characters are shown their gimmicks. Soundwave then uses set powers to have his dog steal all the Autobots' data. Soundwave then takes his data and believes his dog Ravage to be captured. Soundwave then reports back and explains the power of hydroelectricity, and Megatron is going to blow it up. So they go to the dam and Soundwave shows off his other little guy, Rumble, to destroy the dam and create a large tidal wave so that they can harvest more power. The Autobots come to try and stop the Decepticons again. More wrong lip flaps as Prowl momentarily sounds like Optimus.
Got to work fast.
The Autobots begin to fly again. So actually some thought actually came with this scene. While most of the Autobots are dealing with Decepticons directly, they had a smaller B-team deal with the flash flood that was also occurring. It's surprising because in a lot of shows they probably just focus on the slap fight between the two sides, but throughout this show we're consistently shown that the Autobots going out of their way to help people and not just focusing on fighting. Granted, when you have so many named characters, splitting the party makes sense and is actually probably easier when writing out fight scenes. Also, not to assume things, but this is made in the 1980s, so I think the wrong voice lines are used here.
Thanks, neighbors!
Autobots are flying and shooting down Decepticon Starscream, and this other dude who never appears again. So the team brawl begins, and why is Optimus in trouble? He can currently fly. It'll be a problem in the future, but not right now. Also, I'd like to mention, as this is a good time as any, of how the pilot has Prime having a slightly different voice.
You destroy everything you touch, Megatron!
See, it's in the same ballpark, but the tone and cadence is just slightly off. He sounds more like an action hero tough guy here than, wise leader. Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime, explained how Prime voice came from him after a conversation with his brother who served in the military and saw real combat.
Peter, if you're going to be a hero, be a real hero. Don't be a Hollywood hero type with all the BS and all the yelling and screaming and trying to be tough. Be strong enough to be gentle.
So after these 3 episodes, it goes from this
You're old, Megatron. Yesterday's model, ready for the scrap heap.
to more akin to this.
He won't be forgotten, Spike. He will live forever, so long as freedom exists.
For the better, really. It added a real layer of maturity that made the character a lot more iconic than he would have been otherwise. Anyways, the fight ends as the Decepticons make off with their loot and the Autobots now need to figure out what to do next. It's also mentioned a few times in this episode that the Autobots aren't actually real fighters, hence why the Decepticons often win despite the number disadvantage, and why for the most part, Decepticons tend to be bigger than the Autobots, something that is kept and used in later Transformers lore as well. Anyways, Decepticons continue to steal plenty of power and then have a lot of Energon cubes. Starscream wastes them and now they're forced to search for more. Also, it should be mentioned that Energon cubes are a newfound invention that Megatron made. Starscream wasted a bunch because he wanted to test how effective they were, and Hound earlier when he eavesdropped on them didn't know what Energon cubes were, just that they wanted power. This was quickly changed and Energon cubes soon became a thing that was always a thing, but for now at least, it's a tidbit that's kind of fun for Megatron as we can see that he is smart. At least he's smarter than most of the idiots that he commands. Speaking of idiots that he commands, Starscream openly mentions how he will take over one day and Megatron is like, whatever. So the Decepticons prepare to strike again, with a load of Decepticons that don't actually exist. More animation errors, hooray, or I guess... So there are like suddenly 25 of them here? Look, where did they come from and what happens to them later? I don't know, I guess they were killed off screen. I mean, it is a war, I guess. To be fair, in the future, random Decepticon grunts that are just made there to, you know, lose to the good guys. The Witwikis along with Trailbreaker then discover the Decepticons' plan and have a brief skirmish with some non-canon Decepticons. Then we see a bunch of generic Decepticons load up a bunch of red crystals. Bumblebee and Sparkplug then go and plant a bomb to try and bury the Decepticons, but are discovered and Sparkplug somehow survives this. Optimus goes to save them, but then the bomb goes off. Optimus then makes this noise.
I don't know if I can do it.
You can imagine what happened here. Anyways, the Autobots dig out Bumblebee and Sparkplug, but Megatron also escapes with enough Energon for his evil plans. Some more stuff happens and both sides regroup. Hound guarding Ravage has some more animation errors, as Hound and Ravage are both momentarily inside the same cage. And Hound tries to trick Ravage by talking about a fake hidden rocket fuel area that Ravage overhears and they let him escape. Ravage then reports back to Megatron, but Megatron is sus, and Starscream shoots him. Megatron has an energy shield for some reason. He's never going to use that again. Starscream then begs for his life, which works as Megatron doesn't kill him, only shoots him a little. Then they go to the rocket fuel trap. Turns out they laid a trap for the Autobots, and the Autobots waste their energy fighting dummies. Like, these things moved around and flew down here, and then they proceed to wrestle and even throw punches out. I don't know what they were. Maybe some Decepticon grunts that were disposable, I guess. Megatron then reveals his scheme and he just flies away and leaves. Autobots just let him do that too, I guess. I guess by the 3rd episode, they kind of realized that they shouldn't have the Autobots fly around anymore, and some more unnamed Decepticon seekers fly through the sky and track a real rocket fuel place. Wait, are rocket fuel places just real things? Oh well, they now have enough energy on a plan to leave the planet with some. So Optimus leads the Autobots in one last fight to stop them. Also, another animation error, as Hound and Ironhide have bullet holes for some reason. The Woodwikis also join in for this fist fight, not sure why. Look, more generic Decepticons. And I know the generic Decepticons because only 3 of these Seekers ever get named. Starscream, Thundercracker, and Skywolf. They're the only 3 that will reappear and do plot-relevant stuff. The others, until the Coneheads arrive, are just there because they needed to fill bodies, I guess. Anyways, the 2 sides fight again and Megatron shows his ability to turn into a gun. A bit stupid, and later versions would have him turn into a plane or a tank, but hey. I like the gun. Even in the new comics, he still turns into a gun, and he just mind controls people. Just fun. Starscream is beaten by a rock, Optimus does judo, and Decepticons retreat back onto the space cruiser. I guess most of the generics are dead now because the team of Decepticons is much smaller now. Also, I just like to mention how we know that the Decepticons robbed, jet fuel plants, an oil rig, blew up a dam, stole some powered crystals, and did a few more raids here and there. No, it feels like only like a dozen or so raids. Apparently they generate enough power from that to bring back to planet Cybertron. I guess this is also a war where, 20 guys are fighting each other. Optimus then uses Sideswipe's jetpack. This is the most Sideswipe will ever be relevant in this show. Unfortunately, Prime fails, and it looks like the Decepticons will get away, but Mirage was invisible and snuck in somehow. I don't know how, as he was down on the ground while the Decepticons were escaping up on an elevator, but anyways, Starscream tried to shoot Megatron again as Mirage destroys the controls of the ship. Starscream then takes out Mirage, but is then shot by Megatron again, but too little too late, as Decepticons just crash into the sea and Mirage returns as a hero. Thus ends the 3-part pilot of the Transformers. It was a pretty coherent 3-parter for the most part, animation errors aside, and established many of the main characters. The show would keep on with this, focusing on a couple of characters for an episode, or giving someone else the spotlight, with Optimus always being the forefront for most of these episodes as well. This 3-parter went on to go for 3.5 seasons, and also even an animated movie full with several games, comics, movies, and cartoons featuring these robots fighting each other. This basic cartoon to sell toys soon became a memorable franchise that is still just chugging along, and all started here with Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh fighting each other over a few extra Duracell batteries. Ah, numb memories. I wonder what happens in the future with this license.
Got a pre-existing juvenile foundation relationship. Statute 270-3. Texas.
Maybe this thing lived for too long. By the way, if you want to watch this 3-parter or even all of Generation 1, it's free on YouTube on Hasbro's official YouTube channel, so go ahead and check them out if you want to. And that's about it for my review. Fun 3-parter. I understand why it was successful, and I understand why kids fell in love with these characters. These characters are well designed. The stories in these episodes are pretty well written, and everything's pretty fun. I don't have much more to say other than that. So, until I bring up some more silly nonsense, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is Captain Bill, signing out. See ya.